The two pieces I chose to talk about I did specifically for this show. Some of the things, everything's within the last 2 years, but I did a few things that I made specifically for this show, and this is one of them. It's called Torrents, and I work with paper it's multi-layered and it's varnished. The images come from two places. These come from a meteorological textbook that I found. I changed them, of course. But there were images of the North Pole, the northern waters. So these things, which I have, of course, changed, are from the ocean. But then I'm part of the piece, all of my pieces too. And what I did here was I took drawings of my own, again, waves and things here, that I then printed to put in the piece. So the piece is all prints, digital prints that I make into the sculpture. And one of the things that's important to me is I love maps. So maps, though, you usually are looking down at them. I make them all three-dimensional so that I feel like I'm part of, I'm in it.
Yeah, they're very sculptural. Do you have a specific name for them?
I call them sculptural drawings, even though they're prints, but you know. And I'm also in some of in most of the pieces, I have here and here, and in a lot of pieces, acupuncture needles. And it's a way of saying, I'm here. It's the ocean, but it's me also. And also to talk about human intervention into deep time I start with a deep time, that's the natural evolution of the oceans and the land. And then the Anthropocene adds human intervention, and that's also suggested with the acupuncture needles.
So that's a very interesting concept. I mean, how important is it to you that people, for those of us who aren't here today, the folks who will watch this later on YouTube and social media, this exhibit is very immersive. It actually, you feel like you're in this map of the ocean when you're in this exhibit. How important for you is that people think about that anthropogenic time that we're in versus the deep time that the ocean has been alive here on Earth?
I want people to think about both. That we are part of the ocean. We have, whether or not we've destroyed things, but I want us to think about both.
All right.
The long time and the intervention.
And for those who aren't here today, I know you've talked a little bit about the materials, but if I can't come in person to see this exhibit, can you tell me a little bit about the texture and the feeling of your piece and sort of like the sensory, because I've said it's a very immersive experience here, but what's the sensory experience that you're going for?
Well, for me, I've always been interested in the sort of narrow space between a drawing and sculpture. So it's not in the round. I love sculpture in the round, but I also really love this narrow space that's ambiguous, and that's both. And I feel like it allows me to be in it. Anyway, so these all refer to the volatile ocean.
And can you tell us why you chose the name Torrents for this piece?
I'm not sure I can.
Well, I mean, it spoke to you in some way, right?
There's that kind of activity that is torrential.
Yeah.
So just became the...
And how do you feel about your artistic influences here? I have some, sort of influences that I see when I look at these pieces. But I'm wondering if you can tell me, what your influences were when you were thinking about doing them.
Interesting. I'm not sure I can, but
Well, for instance, for me,
Cuddles is a...
yeah, okay, go ahead.
So I know, but you say
Well,
about
so
it.
for me, when I first went to your studio, and I had the privilege of going to visit Phyllis's Brick Bottom studio, where she's been for, 30 years?
Long time.
Yeah, and seeing all of her different work. And when I saw these, I couldn't help it, and it's such a pop icon, please forgive me. The Hakusai's wave just sort of popped into my head
sure.
because of the movement and the color and the, the ocean-centric thing. So I was wondering what you were thinking about when you were making these pieces.
I'm not sure I was thinking about another artist at the time. I mean, I'd have to rethink. I do have influences, but I have to think about that.
All right, that's fair. I mean, sometimes the art just comes out of you, right? And
Yes.
this is, right? So it sounds like this is one of those magical
What
things.
happened was I've been doing three-dimensional landscape pieces. They used to be framed, and I did a lot of around the desert about rivers drying up. So I did a lot of those kinds of colors, deserty colors. And then I decided to go north and think about it. And I started a series called Northern Waters. And when I started the first one, the next day, Sandy hit New York. And I said, I think I'm onto something here. We're talking, what's going on. So it sort of shifted my attention to the north and to these kinds of colors and this kind of location from rivers and things.
Well, that's wonderful. And it sounds like even before you had a sort of ecological influence in your work. Maybe not
Yes.
an environmentalism influence, but definitely
No, it
an
was.
ecological
No, definitely.
influence. Oh,
And,
wonderful.
yeah. And the other thing is, I grew up near the ocean. I don't think I've ever lived far from it. And I wouldn't want to. It's something that I really feel is a part of me. So I guess that's what this also is.
That's
I'd had an MRI because I'd had a concussion, but I got so involved and interested in the images that I did a lot. I did a whole series of drawings and everything. And so when I was thinking about this new work, I decided to use that imagery. So all of, as opposed to a map, I mean, I made it into a map, and here's, there's the map too, but the lines are all from the drawings that I've done.
So I think that's really interesting because if you think about maps, nature versus maps that humans make, we are nature and we are a map ourselves. And when I look at these, I see that nature in your brain has replicated itself here in the ocean. And it reminds me of currents, it reminds me of animals. So can you tell me a little bit about how you feel that this works with the maps that you have on the surrounding and on the outside?
Well, again, I'm trying to combine my presence and my interior presence with the wild ocean, ocean that's not me, but is. And as I said before, the ocean has been a part of my life forever.
Well, I think it's wonderful, and I love, again, all of your pieces have such movement to it, and the sweeping maelstrom, very aptly named, that is going on here is really wonderful. I wonder if, talking about the name again, how did you come up with maelstrom? Was it something based on your drawings, or was it?
No, it was based on how it looked to me, that it looked like there was something going on, almost like a whirlpool in these.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So can you tell us a little bit about how you talked about how you were starting this work, but I know you were doing sculptural work before. How long have you been doing this as part of your art career?
20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was, what I was doing before, well, there is actually a reason why. I was doing cast work that also had wire, so there were three-dimensional drawings with wire and these vessel-like objects that were cast. And I was invited to be in a show about water that had limitations. It had a, you know, those script, what were they called? Where you have to hang something.
Yes.
So I couldn't attach them into the wall in these two locations. So it just took a while, and I started doing things where I used wires, but I started using the maps and wires and things, and then little by little it left the frame. And I like, I guess I like the idea of moving out of a rectangle. I like starting with the rectangle. I don't start with a circle, although I might at some point, because these are all do have circles. So, but playing with a rectangle and moving out from it has been something that's been going on for quite a while.
Oh, that's wonderful. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would like to share?
Are there any questions? And then,
Are there any questions?
I was wondering with the chiropractic, you specifically said, you know, chiropractic needles. I was wondering about the
acupuncture needles.
Sorry, acupuncture.
It's a way of, because I mean, they're a healing thing, of course, but it's a way of putting myself into the piece very subtly. You know, they're the way they are in this piece, but some of them are more obvious. They're red. You know, the handle, the needles are all hidden into the piece. Mm. So it's a way of my presence.
Well, and it's also recycling too. I mean, it's
yes.
part of the ocean, mm-hmm. right? I think you told me when I visited the studio that you were that you didn't want to throw them away. It seemed awful to you to throw them away, which is a really great way to bring it again full circle. It's not only you, but it's reusing materials.
Right. That's true.
So that's really terrific. All right.
Wait, there's one question and then, yeah, sorry.
I just wanted to say I really like the way the shadows are working from the piece onto the wall. Yeah. And, you know, becomes part of it, really. And just wondered though if you were thinking about how that was working.
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we played a lot with the lights to make sure the shadows were the way I wanted them. Mm-hmm. So, and someone else, yeah. And then you have, yes?
Well, I was just thinking from what you were saying about the acupuncture needles. I guess they can't hear me with this one. And the brain MRI that's in those images of the ocean, about the neurology of it all. That is, you know, the acupuncture needles work to conduct and stabilize sort of electrical currents in our bodies and in our brains in particular. And it just made me start thinking about what the possibilities were, because of course the ocean is also just a lot of terribly destabilized currents and temperatures and so on. Mm-hmm. But there might be a clue in acupuncture.
That's interesting.
For, you know, some kind of clue for somebody who thinks, who's a marine biologist, which I am not. So I can stop talking now. But I love it when that, you know, when those ideas can leap from art to science and science to arts.
Thank you, because I need to go further.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It is really wonderful how art can, art really is a great unifier for, you can, I've always thought you can fact somebody into going to do something once because it makes them feel guilty, but in order to actually engage people on a continuous basis, you have to make them feel. And I think your work does a really nice job of that. So,
can I just make a comment? Because absolutely, knowing Phyllis for quite a number of years and seeing the work, that's what I feel. It's her deep feeling and concern for the things in her work, even though she says, it's me and I study this and I do this. I get that real kind of communication that this person cares deeply, she's involved, she's internalized it, and she talks about it to her friends sometimes.
all right, well, if there are, thank you for that, and I know you had one.
Yeah, I have one question. I'm just curious in looking at the two that you chose to talk about your selection of color, in particular the blues that this kind of a blue feels like a much deeper, almost colder blue, and this feels quite different. And just how that played into, and then to your left, that looks to me very, very different because of the way the black and the light blue is mixed in. So I was just curious about how that plays into your composition.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I wanted this show to basically be limited in its palette. And yes, there are different blues, but it's basically blues and then white and black, which is a way of narrowing it, but also spreading it in some way.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I just feel like making another comment.
Fine.
Linking up with your last sentence, you narrowed it, but it's so wide. It's just amazing. To me, I mean, I saw the images on a screen, and it's nothing. Obviously, that's an obvious thing to say, but to see this structure here and to see it play against the wall, and there's so much there. I just want to express my enthusiasm.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's wonderful.
And a lot of hand-touched things too. When you get up close, it's not just the paper and the way you changed it with the computer, but with your hands, it's really amazing.
I also love how contiguous you've made some of them. It's almost like a building of movement and motion from the way we see the ocean, from the way we see the wind, from the way we see things, the Antarctic movements, the glaciers. And I think you've captured something that, gosh, I think, is Phyllis aware of all this?
So I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to go over here because it's the easiest way to do it and talk about, and I know we didn't talk about this ahead of time, but we did talk about it in your studio, so I know you have things to say about it. Can you tell me a little bit about the puzzle pieces? Because they're very evident in these two works.
Up until very recently, all my pieces had either the puzzle shapes. These are actually puzzle pieces. These small things. This is a big puzzle piece that I traced and made into the paper. But these are. It's about things coming apart and fitting together a little differently, perhaps. But so I've used puzzle pieces, and that will be a continual thing.